Okay, yeah. So here you can see us one more time, and also our dear Pavel, who you will hopefully see later. And the plan for today is that I would like to start and explain the title to you for our webinar, and the research that kind of lies behind this title in the presentation we are going to give. Then I will introduce you to the EMCE network. Olenka has already mentioned it several times, and I can already say at this very early point that you are welcome to join our network. And finally, Katharina and Herta will go into some examples and talk about what could be competences that teachers need who work in the context of forced migration. And then I will have the pleasure to kind of wrap this whole discussion up and open up the discussion with our audience. So now we chose to give this webinar the title of Reframing Migration. Why would we like to reframe migration? Because as you might know, or some of you, it depends on the country you are in, but we have the focus on Central Eastern Europe, and their migration, oh, I'm sorry, this is too early, is a quite politicized topic, and very often it is viewed in a rather negative light. And this negative discourse on migration overlaps with other discourses from the educational field, such as teacher shortage, teacher well-being, or teacher health. So in a way, this kind of exacerbates the whole discourse. It's a rather negative discourse in its own. And last, but certainly not least, this migration discourse is also shaped or presented via public media. And I don't need to explain to you how public media works nowadays, but of course it tries to attract attention. It has only limited time. It looks for sensations. So this is also like, we have this famous quote by Marshall McLuhan, the media is the message. Of course, media also shapes the migration discourse, how we talk about it, and what this way, in how far this makes certain things possible or not possible, impossible. But of course, as we know and as research also shows, migration is neither negative nor positive, but can take very, very different forms. And correspondingly, every label that we apply to people who have to migrate or who wish to migrate or who decide to migrate, this kind of labeling is also always a generalization, and it obscures the view of the individual. What we would like to do with this webinar is to think about ways how we can support teachers who work in the field of school and forced migration, how we can professionalize their habitus as teachers. So we also think about academic teacher training. And of course, eventually, we hope that children, parents, and teachers will benefit from our research and our exchange of ideas. Now, this would have been Pavel's part, but I will try my best, and I think I can do it. I would briefly like to introduce you to the EMCE Research Network. It is, as you can see, a rather fresh and young network, which we established last year. And the reason behind is that during our research, we discovered that there seems to be a gap between migration studies and educational studies, especially if we look at the region of Central Eastern Europe. And as a consequence, we established this network with researchers and activists from Poland, Germany, Hungary, Ukraine, Czech Republic, and we are growing, and we welcome colleague researchers and also, of course, people from other countries. Our main goal, as I explained earlier, is to fuse the research on education and migration in Central Europe, and along with this, more concrete goals such as inclusive education, support for teachers, and also transnational collaboration. This is actually an aspect that is very important to us, especially when we work in the field of forced migration. It makes a lot of sense to look at migration movements from a transnational perspective, not only from a national perspective, so to leave the national framework of nation states. And we also try to bridge university research with activism and collaboration with schools and NGOs. We are currently doing a lecture series to which you are very warmly invited. We started last week with the director David Bernay on his newest movie, Solidarity. Very important topic when we talk about forced migration. Why do some groups receive solidarity, others not? And we will continue. So every month there is an online lecture that you can join, and we gather scholars, activists, policymakers, and we hope to kind of get the whole discussion on education migration started. Again, you're very welcome to join. Just follow us, for example, on Facebook, and then you can participate. Yes, and with this being said, I would like to briefly introduce you to our project Act4Mig, a course for teachers on forced migration. This is kind of the underlying research of what we are going to present to you today. It is an Erasmus Plus project running from 2024 to 2027, based on research literature, but also on our own empirical research. And our final goal is to design an open access course for pre-service and in-service teachers on the topic of forced migration. Why we do this? Because the countries which are involved have quite different histories and experiences when it comes to migration. And correspondingly, we can also observe different political discourses, which are also partially against migration. Yeah, so this is also something we need to mention. How can we possibly find solutions if the overall political situation is rather against it? Or let's talk about the example of the so-called passive state. Yeah, if there is no state respondents, but if in the case of forced migration, the activism is just with the civil society and no systemic approach. That's a big challenge in Central Eastern Europe. So this being said, as an example, we have quite different experiences, not only negative ones, also positive, optimistic ones. We have different policies, different academic discussions, and also quite different approaches in schools. So for example, if we look at Germany, the country that I'm representing in the EMCE network, we do have professorships for education migration context, for example. But then in other countries at other universities, we do not find this combination. So there are quite some differences, and we would also like to kind of bridge these differences and create a transnational discussion that is open to anyone, no matter from which country you come from, or no matter if the topic forced migration has already been institutionalized or not in your country. Yes, and this being said, I would hand over to Katharina, who will talk about what we understand by teacher professionalization.
Thank you so much, Christina. So I will now continue. I would like to start with teacher professionalization and competences. And now we would do a little exercise, but before we do it, I would like to emphasize that now there is a big shift in understanding what does teaching and learning means. It's shift in perspectives. So from the teacher more to the student who is in the center. And also in Germany, it's called Beziehungskompetenz as a competence to relationship, which is very important for teachers. So the term competence itself describes a personal capacity to cope with specific situational demands. And competence is rather learnable and teachable. Teacher education and qualification plays a big role in optimizing educational processes. The use of different terms like qualification, competence, expertise, professionalization is very inconsistent and very different. But we can say that competence is a orientation as a didactic attitude. Sorry for my English. So competence orientation therefore means orientation towards the pupils in the sense that they are the ones who learn or who want to learn, who have to learn. There is no other way. So education is always self-education. And there is research also says that it's also important not how the teachers see the student, but also how the students see themselves. So also the self-reflection process. And also education is always a self-education for a teacher itself. Learning is an active process that starts with a learner and must be driven by a learner. Competence orientation in the classroom accomplishes this didactic change of perspective from mediation to appropriation. This is not simply a methodical approach or even a special trick. The change of perspective is didactic insofar as it brings the intentional dimension of the pedagogical processes to bear. It is about a didactic attitude, about adopting a didactic perspective that asks what students need so that they can learn. Perhaps it is helpful in this context to speak of cultural quality. In competence-oriented teaching, a culture is cultivated in which learning comes first. And learning at school is not primarily a question of instrumental technology, but of cultivated interaction between people. And it is important to look for a school that is characterized by a culture in which people enjoy learning. Thank you. Next slide, please. Mm-hmm. And this is what I wanted to present to you, a model which was developed by Baumert and Kunter, a model of teachers' professional competence. And it's actually from 2013. I'm sorry, but the initial one, the initial one was in 2006, and this is the updated one from 2013. Apologies. So this coactive research team proposed a model of teachers' professional competence that is theoretically rooted in the teacher-specific literature on professional knowledge, but integrates the insights gained from this approach with the literature on professional competence and its assessment. Professional practice is seen as a result from interplay of various factors, and these are specific values, beliefs, and goals. These aspects in this gray area you can see, motivational orientation, and self-regulation. And the last one, which is explored, it is professional knowledge. So this non-hierarchical model of professional competence is a generic structural model that needs to be specified for the context of teaching. So this is the context for mathematics teachers. If you have a look on domains of knowledge, content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, pedagogical psychological knowledge, organizational knowledge, and counseling knowledge. And here is the knowledge of students' mathematical thinking or mathematical tasks provided. So the researcher distinguished between four aspects of competence: knowledge, beliefs, motivation, and self-regulation, and each of them comprises more specific domains derived from available research literature. And these domains are further differentiated into facets, which are operationalized by concrete indicators. I don't want to talk too much about theory, but I want for us to work a little bit practically. And if you click the next slide, please. Mm-hmm. I want you to take your phone or smartphone, if you can, or on your computer, to ask this question, please. What competences, in your opinion, should teachers have in the context of schooling and forced migration? Just the first word or a sentence, anything what you would like to say about it. You can scan the QR code, or you can join slide.com website and put in the the password for it. So please do it now, and then we will see each other's contributions, hopefully on the screen. But you have time now just to do this. If it doesn't work, please let me know. Yes, I can see already some people are answering. Few people are typing. Yes, thank you. Yes, and if you, Christina, please click the next slide. I'm not sure if it will work, but if you click the link of next slide, we should see all what other people are writing. I couldn't do it on the slide, but following this link, it should be able to see. I hope it will work, and we will see. But in the meantime, please write in the chat, write in the using QR code. Is it working? Is it following your? Yeah.
Can you see it, Katarina?
No, I only see presentation now, but you
and
have to stop presentation, I'm
I have
afraid.
to stop presentation and show it again. Just a second. You want to show it or shall
Yeah.
I read it? I can also read it to you.
Maybe show it, yeah, so everyone can
Okay.
see it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I'll just share it again.
So what competences should teachers have in the context of schooling and forced migration? Some of you shared inclusive pedagogy, intercultural knowledge and didactic skills, studying for their students in front of the institutions, standing. Thank you. Linguistic and intercultural competencies. Thank you very much. Knowledge about home countries. Thank you so much. Collaborative learning, teachers, students, parents, school, community. Thank you so much. First one was listening skill. Thank you so much. So I forgot to mention it's anonymous. Thank you so much. Trauma-informed approaches, socio-emotional learning techniques, understanding of individual context from where students have come, collaborative learning, teachers, students, parents, school community. Thank you so much. Language support, trauma-informed pedagogy. Very good. This is exactly what we will be talking now. Thank you so much. Knowledge of history. Very good. Very good. Thank you. One more minute and then we will finish the exercise.
So I return to the presentation, Katarina?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, please, yeah. If somebody writes now, I will see it in my screen. I have collected all the answers. So I think we collected all the answers as for now. So the main topics are pedagogy and knowledge. Thank you so much. Yeah, so thank you very much for your answers. So before I pass the floor to Herta, I would like to emphasize that this is exactly about what all those competences are very correct and very right, and this is what teachers needs to know in first of all language and trauma-informed approaches or trauma-sensitive pedagogy or trauma pedagogy. There is a lot of different names of it. Knowledge of SLA. Thank you, Olenka. Yes, I'm afraid I don't know what is SLA, but you can tell us if you can. Yeah.
Second language acquisition.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Very good point. Yeah. Yeah. So most of the researchers also say that in questions in teaching of refugees and student minority students, the most two risiko factors and resource factors are always, first of all, parents and second, teachers. So, and this is the two biggest risiko and resource factors. And we will talk about it a little bit more later. And I will now pass the floor to Herta to talk about the role of multilingualism in teacher competencies and education.
Thank you. Welcome everyone from my side as well. So after this short brainstorming together, what teachers should have, what kind of competencies teachers should have in the context of schooling and forced migration, we wanted to highlight an example of a competence. I will talk about the linguistic knowledge. Teaching is a complex task requiring teachers to develop various skills and knowledge to meet everyday challenges. The discussion on language teaching methods has evolved over centuries, with communicative language teaching in the 1970s, shifting the focus towards language as social action rather than just a system of science. This understanding led to the concept of communicative competence, emphasizing that foreign language teaching should equip learners to meet their own communicative needs in both receptive and productive domains. However, teacher competencies should be seen as complementary to learner competencies. They are mutually reinforcing. For effective education, both parties should actively participate in the teaching and learning process. Teachers need to develop their competencies to support students in learning, while students' progress influences the methods and strategies teachers employ. When collecting teaching competencies, it's essential to focus on skills and knowledge that support educators in teaching students affected by migration and forced displacement. Let's explore some essential linguistic and intercultural competencies that are important for teachers working in diverse educational contexts. Please click on the next slide. Linguistic and intercultural competencies such as language awareness, where learners should be encouraged to reflect on language and critically assess its use. This involves understanding how languages shape communication and identity, developing linguistic consciousness to engage critically with different languages. Multilingualism can exist at both individual and societal levels. A key concept here is live word multilingualism. I will get back to this definition later, which refers to how people navigate and include multiple languages in their daily lives. Translanguages, a central aspect of multilingual education, recognizes that multilingual individuals fluidly use all their linguistic resources to communicate effectively. In practice, this means that teachers can encourage students to draw on all their linguistic resources rather than artificially separating languages in the classroom. Georg Auenheimer defines intercultural competence as the ability to communicate and collaborate across cultural differences. This requires understanding cultural diversity, developing empathy and critical reflection, challenging stereotypes and prejudices, and teachers should also embrace pedagogical professionalism, meaning they support a diverse student body, use cultural diversity as a resource, and recognize and address educational inequalities. The connection between these two concepts, according to Auenheimer, is that intercultural competence is an essential component of pedagogical professionalism. Teachers should continuously engage with social and cultural changes to ensure fair and inclusive education. Please click on the next slide, and I would like to encourage you to share your thoughts just quickly for 1 minute. What does multilingualism mean to you? You can do it in the chat room, and I hope we will have time at the end to discuss them. We would like to see how you see multilingualism in your context. So just quickly, a few seconds, and then I will move on. I cannot see the chat room yet.
Please write in the chat. Don't be shy.
Okay. You can also do it like I wanted to give you an input, like what are the main key concepts I work with, and since we have limited time, I would like to move on. So please, Christina, click on the next slide and feel free to finish your thoughts, and you can add more thoughts in the chat room, and we will discuss it later. As I focus on German language research and pedagogy in the field of multilingualism, I wanted to highlight a few key concepts that are particularly relevant to our discussion today. These concepts are central to understanding the educational and linguistic dynamics of multilingual classrooms, and they reflect important areas of research and practice. I kept the German definition as well, so maybe you can Google it later, and after our presentation you can see the references. There are English publication also available about these topics. So I already mentioned the concept of life word multilingualism. This concept refers to the practical everyday use of multiple languages in a person's life. It emphasizes the role of language in shaping an individual's identity and the interaction with the world around them. Also, one concept that might be interesting in Canada, the heritage language, that refers to the language spoken by a student's family or community, often in the context of migration or multicultural societies. This concept is crucial in understanding how heritage languages can be maintained, included, or marginalized in the educational system. The concept of inclusion in education focuses on ensuring that all students, regardless of their linguistic background, have access to the same educational opportunities, promoting equality and participation in the learning process. Sorry, I have to move to the my next slide because I would like to mention one more study that might be interesting for you. But our presentation will be uploaded, so maybe you can check these definitions later. To explore the importance of maintaining both the new language and cultural ties, we can turn to a fascinating study by Katarina Brizic, titled The Secret Life of Languages. In her research, she examines how children from immigrant backgrounds navigate the challenges of acquiring a second language while also preserving their first language. And her findings shed light on how language development is deeply influenced by societal and educational factors, particularly in the context of migration. In connection with her study, the linguistic capital model was developed, and the model posits that the acquisition of linguistic capital is determined by multiple levels of influence. You can see them here, and now I won't explain it, but this model is highly relevant to our exploration of multilingualism in the context of forced migration, as it emphasizes the role of institutional, societal, and personal factors in shaping the linguistic capital of migrant children. One last thought, that if we take a multilingual perspective, we can prevent the heritage languages from being marginalized or lost. Thank you. And now I think Katarina.
Yeah, now I'm take over again. So thank you so much, Herta. It's so interesting. Yeah, so Anna, I will take over to trauma pedagogy. So this concept was developed by German scientists as a discipline, and it's called trauma pedagogic. But initially, it was thought about working with children who had childhood trauma. But also we know, and some of you have also written in the chat, in the exercise, that there is some such thing like trauma-informed approach, or sometimes it's called trauma-sensitive pedagogy. But the very simple explanation that I wanted to share with you is that actually trauma pedagogy wants to use psychological knowledge about trauma in pedagogical practice, in pedagogical settings, because it believes that using this knowledge in practice on everyday basis will help children to improve. And especially it works especially for internats or children houses or places where children live who have or have no parents or are deprived of parental rights. So what I wanted to start with, just to reflect a little bit, what do children in Ukraine experience or experienced prior or during to displacement journeys? Because if we talk about context of schooling and migration, we often, and some of you also written in the chat, to know the history, what happened before this child came as a refugee in our class. And this is an example which you can see here on the slide. This is from the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner report, which was released like a few days ago. This report is called "The Impact of the Armed Conflict and Occupation on Children's Rights in Ukraine." It's a big research that was done during the last 3 years, from February 2022 to December 2024. And also I had experience and honor to work with frontline workers in Ukraine last summer, and to know from them about the experiences of working with children close to the front line. And generally, the risks and challenges linked to situation of adversity are the same for any country where there is conflict or war. But what is specific for Ukraine? I want to start with specifics for Ukraine, as with this story here. Like, a man explained that after his family fled a frontline community and was separated from relatives in occupied territory, his 11-year-old daughter became withdrawn, and his 4-year-old son developed a fear of all loud noises and suffered from alopecia due to psychological stress. There is a lot of studies which also says that also in this study that they have also hearing impairments because of loud noises. And one woman in this study also said that the war has caused her first-grade son to confuse numbers. Or children stop talking, those who could talk. Their survey data also show the worsening of mental health among children. This is only one of very, very little excerpt of challenges that children face in occupation territory, but also after leaving the occupation territory. Report also stated that people in Ukraine, including children, missed medical appointments and treatments due to travel risk in regions prone to attacks with adverse health consequences. One hospital administrator told how children with chronic diseases frequently missed rehabilitation sessions due to travel risks, and that ambulances could not always reach frontline towns due to the security situation. Children's social support networks were weakened due to the consequences of the hostilities, displacement, family separation, and online schooling, which increased their vulnerability to psychosocial distress. Psychologists also in the same studies said that children suffered from attachment and self-esteem disorder, sleep disturbances, anxiety, and depression. A woman psychologist working close to the area of active hostilities in Zaporizhia was worried that war has become completely normal for children. Another woman said that where all children must study online, she described delayed language development among children who had been deprived of sufficient social contact. And next slide, please. But for all of the children who experience adversity, there is also always a risk of separation from family, violence, economic hardships, loss of education, malnutrition and stunt development, and risky behavior. The potential consequences of traumatic experiences according to the UN Refugee Agency Trauma Handbook are first of all recurring intrusive memories like flashbacks, repetitive behaviors, and flashbacks. It's also I want to come back to this one. It's also about triggers, like potential triggers that may include sounds like fire alarms, siren tests, smells, or some sights, movements, and touches. So children and adolescents who have experienced traumatic events often suffer from sudden and uncontrollable intrusive memories and thoughts. And they may relieve the trauma as if the traumatic situation is occurring in the present moment, a phenomenon this is known as flashbacks. Repetitive behaviors, it means that affected children and adolescents may reenact aspects of their traumatic experiences, such as by playing out scenarios. And this is also what I have seen by my own eyes, like playing war and using toys like guns. So when these behaviors are repeated frequently or almost compulsively, it is referred as post-traumatic play. Anxiety. So many children exhibit both specific and generalized anxieties. School-age children may develop an intensified or prolonged fear of abandonment, as well as fear of the dark or of strangers. I will not explain each of these consequences. You can see that this is also the attitudes toward people is altered. Life and the future. So mostly they see future negative or no future at all. There is also avoidance, regressive behavior, guilt, and physical complaints. It means also disassociation, hypervigilance. Hypervigilance, it's when their body remains in a state of heightened alert. And post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, is also most common for all children who experienced adversity. So while psychologists and therapists have expanded their knowledge of psychotrauma and its consequences through new research, educators in residential facilities have increasingly reported over the past few decades that they feel inadequately trained and prepared to work with traumatized children and adolescents and to address the associated challenges. So, in response to that, experts began developing specific pedagogical standards for addressing trauma in residential settings, but also trauma of a special event or adversity. And it was developed in the 90s, and it was leading to the emergence and ongoing development of the field of trauma pedagogy. Next slide, please. And what can teachers do actually? And this is something what you've been writing in the chat, to know about trauma-informed practice and what does it mean, and making the school a safe space, and supporting a child with traumatic experience at school. The development of trauma-informed practice can be tracked back to the decades ago. but it is grounded in neuroscience, in psychology, and in social sciences, also in attachment and trauma theories. It also emphasizes the complex and far-reaching impact of trauma on individuals' worldview and relationships. It can be applied to across all public service sectors, including schools, social welfare, physical health, housing, education, criminal justice. And making the school a safe space and supporting a child with traumatic experience in schools, you can do it using some of the helpful advices I put on the slide. They include mindful interactions because it reduces tensions. It means that ensuring that children and adolescents with refuge experiences feel welcomed, accepted, and safe in the school environment. And it also provides routines, provide choices, increased support and encouragement, clear, firm boundaries. You have to know trauma-related behavioral issues, like every bad behavior has its own cause, has its good cause, like bad, even if it's bad behavior. Create a safe space for discussions, offer simple and realistic explanations, be aware of environmental triggers like lights, sounds, and so on. Anticipate and prepare for difficult situations. In this context, it's very useful to have a second teacher or support if a school is multi-professional, and this is very good to use help. Also, advanced warnings and monitoring peer reactions. It means also trying to see the reaction, interplay, and interaction between children with and without refugee background. Understand trauma reenactment in play, so recognize this when it happens. Be sensitive to spiritual concerns and consider academic accommodations. Next slide, please. What are the educational implications of trauma context for teaching practice? This is just a conclusion of what very short what could be done. To know some expertise in war trauma, so to know what happened prior to displacement, during displacement, and what are the consequences of war trauma. To know mental health effects of displacement and adversity, to identify and to do early intervention, to organize referrals where they are needed, so to know your limits, what I can do, what I cannot do with children as teacher, to be in contact with community providers and community support, to approach help when dealing with children with traumatic experiences if you know that it's not, your help is not enough, and to know techniques for working with children individually and in group. So there are a lot of things that I could explain more, but I will stop now and save it for the questions. Thank you.
Yes, so I have the honor to wrap up our presentation. So, of course, what we presented today is just a small insight into the project or in the question, how can we professionalize teachers in the field of schooling and forced migration? And as the participants here also in the audience have already indicated, there are like big topics that are standing out, and it's always language, which has a lot to do, especially in Europe. It would be interesting to see how it's being done in Canada or other countries. But there's this famous work by Gogolin, who talks about the monolingual habitus of schools. Yeah, so because our schools here in Europe are so much a copy of the nationalist paradigm of the 19th century, we design schooling according to these laws, to these imaginaries from the 19th century. And 19th century nationalism is monolingual, but Europe was not monolingual before, quite the contrary. So this is something we are struggling with regards to a structural level, because if we talk about the educational inclusion, I mean, inclusion has become really like a key word in the academic pedagogical discourse. When we talk about the specific context of forced migration, I think it makes sense to look at two dimensions. One is the structural dimension, and the other the relational dimension. And what I mean by structural is, for example, the procedure of enrollment, for refugee students. Every country, also depending on the type of school, has different procedures how, when refugee students are being accepted into school. Representing Germany, I could, for example, give you the so-called welcome classes. So there is a tendency that you put refugee children, not only refugee children, but this is our topic, into so-called welcome classes. Now, it must be noted that the German educational system is a federal one. It's not a central one. That means, in effect, we have 16 different educational systems in Germany, and every state, every federal state does it a little bit differently. But that would be one example. Do you put the child in a more or less segregated class? Or does the child or the young adult become part of the so-called regular class? And this topic alone would be enough for a webinar like this. What are the advantages, disadvantages of such a decision? But I think when I talk about the second dimension, the social one, the relational one, I think we would find more arguments that would argue for a very quick inclusion in the regular class. But maybe another example for the structural inclusion is when it comes to the learning biographies of refugee students. And now we cooperate very strongly with Ukraine, and still, after 3 years of this horrible war, we still have in many countries a large number of people whose hope to return to Ukraine once it is safe, to hope to rebuild it, taking their children with them, which is a topic on its own. But wouldn't it make sense for teachers to, like Katharina said, anticipate the situation and not just to say, okay, you have now become part of this whatever national school system, you have to follow the rules, but to redesign schools as an institution and make it easier for those biographies, learning, educational biographies, to reconnect with another school system. That's what I mean by the structural inclusion. And the same applies to teachers. I have mentioned at the beginning of our webinar the teacher shortage in Europe. Now, many countries like Poland or Germany, we are actually theoretically welcoming Ukrainian teachers in our school systems, but it's quite challenging. It's not easy what those Ukrainian teachers have to do. I don't have the time to go into details, but for example, here in Germany, they have to pay for this, for this recognition process and so on. So you have to make a refugee pay for her education and integration in the labor market, which seems very crazy, especially against the teacher shortage. But it's a different topic. I just wanted to kind of make it clear what I mean by the structural inclusion of refugees. And now we come to the relational dimension. This is something that is not only important for refugee students, but for any student. We know it that for children, and the younger they are in school, what matters is the social context. You want to feel safe, you want to feel welcome, you want to find new friends. We call it, from educational science, we call it peers. This is important for any student. For refugee students, it's even more important because they had to leave their old peers behind. It's not sure if they can stay in touch. If they stay in touch, it depends very much on the situation, if this is actually beneficial or if it just hurts a lot. But the social surrounding, the social inclusion, the relational dimension is important. And we have already mentioned it. the role, the relationship with the teacher is very, very important. I think, was it Katharina who mentioned it, that the relation with the teacher can lead to trauma, as can the relation with the parents. So, and vice versa, if the teacher is able to establish a good, reliable relation, that's really the most important thing before you start teaching the language or any subject knowledge. You need to work on the social relation between teachers and students. Yes, and I would like to end our I would like to, actually, I would not like to end, but I have
Uh,
to end at some point. But the good
uh,
thing is that I then can open up the
uh,
discussion. I would like to show you a quote from my own research that I conducted in Hungary. And I was talking to a young man, let's call him Bohan, who came who had to flee from Ukraine and first participated in a NGO project to help him to adapt to the whole situation as it was, and also to help him to start learning Hungarian. And then after a few months, he actually enrolled at a Hungarian, quite prestigious high school in Budapest. And in his interview, at one point, he had this very nice sentence where he said, "It's easier to dance Hungarian than to speak it." And this might sound a little, yeah, just, entertaining, but I think there is a lot in it because it shows that Bohan was able to preserve a bit at least of its own personality. Yeah, it's not that he just arrived under this label refugee and that he had to fight his way out of this labeling, but there was something that was really him, part of his personality, and he could show it, he could do it. So he actually experienced some joy, which could boost his self-esteem. And there was some sort of continuation. I don't want to kind of repeat or trigger those memories of the early months when the war started, but there was so much uncertainty, so much existential uncertainty. And here, with this dancing, he could actually have some sort of continuation, so a transformation of past experiences into new ones, and those new ones in the host country were also positive. And of course, continue because, sorry, I mentioned because for me it's so, I know it, of course, but he did folk dance in Ukraine and continued folk dance in Hungary. Of course, folk dance in Hungary is different than in Ukraine, but there is some sort of continuation, yeah, continuing this hobby. And this really helped him with the social integration, and of course also motivated him to use Hungarian as a way to communicate with his new peers from this hobby. Yeah. So this could be one example. If you really see the student beyond this labeling, yeah, if you see him or her as an individual, what are your interests and what are you good? What can you continue? And maybe at the beginning at least, without the target language. Yeah, things like playing chess, playing an instrument, doing games, any kind of sports. It's a common language. It's not a linguistic language, but it's a universal language that children and young adolescents can share. And I consider this quite important and should be the first step, this kind of social integration, feeling safe, having some self-esteem, doing something I'm good at, something I enjoy, and that this can be a foundation for whatever comes next. May it be a short-term stay in the host country or a longer stay. So that being said, thank you very much. I'm also very pleased to tell you that Paweł Rudnicki from the University of Lower Silesia has also joined. So he will be there for the discussion. And he's actually the main organizer of the lecture series, which takes place or which is taking place every month now. So I think we don't go into the references now, but if you need them, we'll be happy to share them. I will stop the presentation here, and I do hope you have some things to share with us. Thank you one more time, Professor Alenka Bilash, for having us here.
Thank you very much.
It's our pleasure. And now I hope that we have some comments or questions from our audience. Don't be shy. Paweł, I'd like to apologize to you. I think that you were unaware that Canada had changed its clock about 3 weeks ago. And
Yeah,
to all of the speakers. So sorry about that. It's a good thing we sent out the email that said the session is starting in 1 hour.
I'm sorry. Normally time's on my side, like Rolling Stones sing, but today it's not.
No problem. Thank you.
Olenko, if I may I,
Yeah.
I find it fascinating to listen to your perspectives, colleagues. I am very interested because it's an area that I'm becoming more and more interested in, but don't know much about. So having the theoretical and the research background that you have presented today is very good for me. I'm Oksana. I am a Canadian citizen who lives in Lviv and is very involved in the education system of Lviv and Western Ukraine. What I'd like to share, though, with you is on Friday, I participated in the presentation of research by the Miyok Institute, which is part of one of the institutes here in the city, where they presented research. They did a series of interviews with organizers of Saturday, Sunday schools, a slightly different perspective than the one you have presented, because what they are looking at is children who have left Ukraine because of the situation, the vtorgninya, as it's called, and are attending schools in Germany, Czech Republic, Spain, Poland, and the United Kingdom. And on Saturday, Sundays come together to what traditionally Ukrainian communities around the world have had are schools. But the trauma that you discussed, especially Catherine, is exactly the same that was presented through the eyes of the administrators. And I find that, well, I'm sure fascinating is not the right word to use. I find it something that we need to look at. There were other elements that they presented in terms of returning to Ukraine. You mentioned that as well. It is something which forced migration people apparently around the world. I was not aware of that, but recently it was pointed out to me, want to do. Certainly when we look at the Canadian experience of the diaspora, and Olenka will support me on that, the parents and the grandparents of the people that came to Canada always dreamed of going back to Ukraine. And I'm certainly an example of that. I did come back to Ukraine, although I'm born in Canada. I think it's interesting too, because the research that I attended on Friday and listened to comes from a very different perspective than yours. And I'm not yet ready to combine the two. I'm going to work on it. But thank you, because it does provide a different way of looking at some of these things. And so I'm really, really happy that I attended today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oksana. I can say that I did a similar study across Canada with teachers in community schools. And what I found really striking about your research, Katrina, Christina, Paweł, and Herta, is the fact, some of everything that you said would apply, even though these people are much further from home, the Ukrainian immigrants, that is, or forced migrants. Interestingly, I found other research that said the further you were away from home, the less likely it was that you would return. And so many of the Canadian families, even though when they first arrived, only thought they would be here for 3, 4, maximum 6 months, are now really settling in, buying homes. They've already purchased cars. And so that brings a kind of a shift in their mentality, even though there would still be connections, long-term connections to Ukraine. Christina, you wanted to say something?
Yes. I think, it would be interesting, to do research on these kind of decision-making, individual decision-making. But I think aside from the individual circumstances, a lot has to do with the kind of status you have as a refugee, because as you all know, in Europe, refugees from Ukraine share the same temporary protection status, which has been renewed and renewed from year to year. And on the one hand, it provided immediate access to very crucial resources like access to the labor market, health insurance, education, and so on. So it was of immediate help. Also, partly criticized, not in itself that it's being done, but that it's not given to every refugee, but Ukrainian refugees. But the thing is, it's temporary. So it's a big question what will happen if it gets lifted, which is, of course, how will the different European countries respond to this? Is there a common European solution to this, or will every European country decide on its own? And this, of course, extends this limbo, this extreme uncertainty. So I don't know how this issue has been solved in Canada. I don't know if you go, maybe you can share it. If you come as a Ukrainian refugee to Canada, I mean, what are your prospects? I mean, because here in Germany, it's difficult to make plans and to, in this way, also emotionally, to settle down, right? You are stuck in this limbo of uncertainty.
May I add
Actually,
something?
oh yes, please, Paweł.
Because we are talking about the education and special education of refugee, concentrate or focus on their needs. And one of our research field is school, which I will not tell the true name, but let's call it Independence. And this is Ukrainian school in Wrocław. We found the school, we discovered the school, we researched the school. It's school run by for refugee students, refugee Ukrainians, teachers and refugee students. And it's invisible school because it was not in our educational system, because the framework and program was Ukrainian, all certificate was Ukrainian, and it was absent in Polish system. So in the first phase of refugee time, the first year, it was very good solution because they're waiting to back Ukraine without any gap year and gap moments. But 3 years after, this is a serious problem, because if you are a kid, if you are a student who came as a 6-year-old person, and now it's 9 or 11 or 15, so the Poland is the main country and they want to stay here. And if school is still invisible, it makes a lot of problems. So we research how this school changing their position from invisible to how visible, how the school hacking system and how Polish system is, not open for beginners and for not Polish speaking kids and schools, which are run on in different framework, different knowledge, different language. So this is also the problem of country where is no migration policy and just reacting policy, reacting for something. So, this is a lot of knowledge about not only refugee and their status, but also about our countries and their not readiness for others. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I know people in the audience also have experience with Ukrainians from forced migrants from Ukraine. Would anyone else like to share any of their observations? Marina?
Hello. Yes, I was forced to leave Ukraine in April 2022. We arrived with my 7-year-old son to the UK. and that experience, what my son faced, how to stay in the Ukraine education system and how to adjust to the UK educational system. It is, to be honest, it is successful. Now he even got a place in an independent school with full scholarship. So for 3 years, he attained the English very well, but he continues studying in Ukrainian school as well. Externally, he has over 15 hours per week Ukrainian online classes. It is math, it is Ukrainian language classes, it is history of Ukrainian language, history of Ukraine, and so on. It is very difficult, and it was successful in our experience because he was in a primary school. But I'm not sure how he will be able to combine everything in secondary school. I think it will be very, very difficult. And we are facing very, very serious decision to stop studying in Ukrainian school. And it is very, very painful for me. It is very painful for him, but I can't overwhelm him. And the director of Ukrainian school, he's studying in a private school in Ukraine, and he tried to persuade me that he is very smart and he will be able to continue at least 2 years with his knowledge he has now. But to be honest, and at the moment I decided that we will continue. We will arrange our lessons for Saturday and Sunday. But to be honest, not all Ukrainian parents, not all Ukrainian mothers abroad, they're very resilient to do that and to push your child to study in both school, to control all studying, because it is not just important to stay in education system. The child need to have online classes. The child need to have access to talk to someone in Ukrainian, not only with you. And it is very, very, very difficult. And it is clear that a lot of parents will refuse to study in Ukrainian school and will adjust in new environment, but it is very, very big decision.
Thank you.
What I can maybe add here, because I think all of us, who work in the field of context and forced migration, when it comes to Ukrainian refugees, we experience the same challenge, right? It was the same in Germany, and I mean, I sometimes feel that with our research, it's maybe just about opening a window, and then the teacher needs to see how far she or he wants to open that window and see what's beyond. Because, for example, we have research by my colleagues Schwendovius and Kollender. I think they will also give a webinar or something in this series. And they, for example, they talked to teachers in Germany, and those teachers were complaining that Ukrainians were so tired in the classroom, so they were not aware of the fact of this burden. And so I think it sounds, I mean, for us working in this field, we are like, what? But sometimes it's really about opening this window and make them see, do you know what this child is doing after school? Do you know what the child is doing on the weekend? And maybe just seeing it can already maybe improve the situation, or at least make it clearer. That's the relational dimension. But when it comes to the structural dimension, what should schools do? What we have in Germany, and it's only a beginning, yeah, it's just the beginning, but we have the so-called herkunftssprachlicher Unterricht. So you have the right for schooling in the language of your parent or parents. So usually it's about, depending on the age, it's maybe 90 minutes a week. It's not much, and you cannot compare it with the online, I mean, pursuing the Ukrainian education. That's clear. But it's maybe a signal of what we understand by an inclusive school, that you do see the multilingual realities, and what takes place in those classes is not just language instruction, but of course also cultural and so on. Again, it's only 90 minutes, but it's something on the structural level to really see the student and the complexities and to learn that for so many reasons you should not just ignore the fact that a student speaks different languages, but that it's his or her right to maintain them. That's the task of an educational institution, right? To support it. Otherwise, why should we call it an institution of education? But again, I completely understand it's a different situation than continuing Ukrainian remote schooling and hoping to finish the Ukrainian school certificate. That's clear.
Some of you may have read the bibliography about forced migrants, particularly focusing on Ukraine, that ULIC put out with the assistance of Maria Storocha and Oksana Budkovska. And I recall a very interesting study that was mentioned there from Estonia, where the school system decided to bring Ukrainian teachers, that is, forced migrants who also had teacher certification, and allow them to teach the students, especially at the beginning. And that certainly seemed like a very positive approach. I'm going to ask Larissa Hajduk, who's the director of the Ukrainian Resource and Development Center at McEwan University, and who's also a partner university with Ukrainian Catholic University. Larissa, maybe you could talk in general, but also maybe mention the film about the deaf, or I can do that. You go ahead.
Thank you so much, Lenka. Thank you, Diaku, and thank you for the team. Thank you. It is so important what you are doing, and so it was great to hear the results and the depth that you are going into. So we are, as you probably know, that we are just Western Canada, Edmonton, Alberta. We have more than 70,000 Ukrainians. We call them here newcomers, which I don't like. So I call them displaced. It's different even talking about the language. All right, the newcomers. This is how everybody's talking about displaced Ukrainians here. So I wanted to mention that at McEwan University, where our small, mighty Ukrainian center is, we have several studies about displaced Ukrainians. One of them is about youth resilience. Dr. Oksana Tashkinova is leading, originally from Mariupol. She is located physically is in Edmonton at McEwan University, but it is led by Dalhousie Resilience Center. This big study, 5 universities, and they conducted in-depth interviews with 25 youth in Edmonton and then in Nova Scotia, and then they went through second round, and the data is so deep, so a lot of information. And I think maybe I can connect you through Olenka with Oksana. You would enjoy chatting with her, and you never know what can come out of it. We also
Definitely.
look at
Thank you so much, Larissa. Thank you.
Yeah, Kate. And so, but talking about schools, and because I'm not involved in research, I cannot, I don't have the data. But what I hear, many students stop the Ukrainian school. It is impossible, and especially here, the 8-9 hours difference, it is impossible. It is impossible, and we are in year 3. And what does it mean? I also heard the feedback that the maybe I shouldn't even talk it. So the classes in the Ukrainian schools were not adapted enough for this online education. And how I am not criticizing by any means. I am not sitting in a war and working and teaching these students, but maybe something to think about as well. In Alberta, we have Ukrainian bilingual program. A lot of displaced students went into these programs, but now, as I understand, maybe Olenka will correct me, they are not taking Ukrainians whose first language is Ukrainian into those schools. However, I think psychologically it was easier for these children to be there. Regular schools in Edmonton, the supports differ as probably anywhere and anytime. So there is some more supports, less support, some are happy, some are not happy. But the behavior is, especially teenagers and especially boys, are very concerning, about the deaf community, we have about 100 people who are deaf, who arrived in Edmonton, but they were in North America at the time of the full-scale invasion. So a lot of them stayed in Edmonton, and our center had collaborations with deaf communities for 20 years because of Dr. Roman Petrician. So there was that connection. And about 100 stay there. Of course, some of the children, I don't remember the number, how many children, but the problems are almost the same. They cannot study a language, which is Ukrainian Sign Language, American Sign Language. They differ. That's one issue. And then on top of that, add English. So it's how these people can even function. So they have to work, to study. We were considering opening English language classes for people who are deaf, and it was not. We were advised that they cannot make time. They cannot attend classes. They cannot attend those classes because they have to work. So the issues are very, very similar. We had another big research in collaboration with the Ukrainian Canadian Congress, Alberta Provincial Council as well on the experiences. And the issues are the uncertainty, this our special co-ed visa, which is turning into very uncertain situation. And maybe I will stop there, Olenka, but I would love to connect you with Oksana Tashkinova, and if we can help with anything else, I'm here. Дякую. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Larissa. Anyone else? Thank you all for sharing.
I don't know if Katerina, if you want to comment on the situation of students who have special educational needs, because you work closely together with Anna Slodozanska, also from Ukrainian Catholic University. So I don't know, Katerina, if you wish to, yeah.
It was actually more Anna's project, not mine project. But the situation for people with disabilities in Ukraine is specifically hard. What I know only this general things that, for example, some reports of UNHCR were stated that children with autism, they had a lot because they have sensitivity to noise and to loud. It's very hard for them to live. And I know many families who left and are actually very happy living in Europe and being there, having some services. But as for our research with Christina, Paweł, and Herta, we also look and want to look in our course about remigration strategies. Yes, about thinking about children who will be returning back to Ukraine and will have to readapt, or maybe they will have. I don't know if you know this. There is this adaptation shock and then readaptation shock. They will have another shock, a readaptation. So we'll be thinking about it. But children with disabilities are lacking social services resources in Ukraine, and this is the last thing that Ukrainian government is thinking about right now. This is people with disabilities who are very marginalized in terms of their needs and right now, and there is a lot of intersectionality here. Depending on the disability, your IDP status, whether you have status or not, where are you living, can you turn, and some families turned back to the occupied territory even because it was hard for them to adapt here, or some left to Europe. So there's a lot of movement. I would say that our country is still on the move. And what is the specific of the situation of Ukrainian refugees in Europe is because it's quite near in terms comparing to Canada or US, it's quite near to travel back to home. Many Ukrainians travel back and forth to Ukraine and back, and back to Germany or back to Poland. Many are still having relatives, a lot husbands or back in Ukraine, or grandparents. So this causes a lot of different like movements, yes, and a lot of different strategies that Ukrainians use in order to maintain connections, or in order to live with one leg in one country and with another leg in Europe and one in another leg in Ukraine. So this is a very specialty, a lot of it. Yeah.
Right, and thank you, Katerina, because this is really nice about this kind of transatlantic encounter, because what Katerina describes, what's sometimes really happening is that families are split. Yeah, so you have obviously the father in Ukraine, and sometimes what I know from qualitative research, we have also children, or especially young adults who make their choice if they stay in a host country or who decide to return. And sometimes it can happen in one family. One kid decides, not a kid, young adolescent, I decide with mom in Germany, and the other daughter says, I wish to return to Ukraine, and you have to endure this as a family. Yeah. And also what I thank you, Larissa, so much for your thoughts, and we would be really grateful if you could connect us.
Yes,
we work
please.
together with a professor for child psychology here at Dresden University, who is also working with refugees. She's running a trauma ambulance, and we've already had discussions with her. And the case of young adolescents is, as you said, is especially pressing, because what's happening if you flee a country as a young adult, you experience the opposite of what should actually happen in this transitionary phase of becoming adult. Instead of spending time with your peers, you lose your peers. Instead of becoming independent, you are limited to a small space with your mom and maybe your grandma. And so on and so on. So this is really, so if we speak about schooling and forced migration, again, we need to differentiate when we look at the age of children and also the gender, probably also, especially in the case of Ukraine. It also matters if you are becoming a young woman or a young man, and how your position is, knowing that other people are fighting in your home country. Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to
Fighting
ask,
and dying, unfortunately, yes.
this is obviously
Yeah,
that could go on.
I just needed to make that last comment because these young people, what we are experiencing and what we are seeing, not the young adolescents, the ones that are slightly older, whose friends are fighting at the front and who are dying. And we see the trauma that is impacting on, and what influence that is having on those who are in Ukraine as well as those who are outside of Ukraine. So I'm sorry, I just needed to add that.
Problem. Thank you. Obviously, so much more could be said. We must arrange for another session of some sort. Christina, is it possible that you could, or one of your team members could put the Facebook link in our chat?
For the EMCE series? Yeah, Paweł, are you still here?
And while we're doing that,
yeah, I will do that.
Thanks. And I've asked Uliana Pizzomecka, one of our previous speakers and someone who's been a real part of the evolution of the Ukrainian Language Education Center, to give some words of gratitude to you, some closing remarks. Uliana.
I'd be delighted. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of ULIC, Professor Bilash, Dr. Ostroha, and of course all of us who've had the opportunity to enjoy today's very thought-provoking presentation, which was expertly and sensitively prepared by Christina, Katarina, Herta, and Paweł. So glad you could join. Thank you for such an engaging webinar. It allowed us to think about what migration actually means, and owing to how it can be misunderstood, how it can be reframed for better teaching, learning, personal and societal development. In other words, improving how teachers as professionals can serve and support their learners by remaining relational learners themselves. We welcome and congratulate our presenters today and their colleagues on establishing the important EMCE project, and encourage participation from all whose work intersects with the aims and themes of this important empirically grounded initiative. Thank you to our presenters for thinking aloud with us today and about better pedagogy, practitioner professionalism, multi-languaging, borderless education, inclusion in all its facets, student relationships, surfacing commonalities, educational collaborations, trauma-informed approaches for schooling in the contexts of forced migration. And thank you for illustrating what it means to be a caring educator. And thank you too, listeners and colleagues, for your questions and comments. We all face the same challenges, especially in the area of policy. But our global community of practice is where we can draw strength to overcome them and help our students find joy, visibility, voice, agency, and appreciate themselves. Thank you all.
Дякую, Uliana. And
Thank you very much.
let me close by reminding the audience about 4 upcoming webinars that we're holding. One on April the 7th, one on May the 2nd, another on May 5th, and one sometime in June. Our speakers are on the screen, and if you do not receive the ULIC newsletter or are not on our mailing list because you heard about this from someone else, please do let us know, and we will make sure that you receive information about some of the upcoming webinars, as well as our newsletter, which covers a wide variety of topics. On that note, thank you, especially to our speakers who came an hour before they thought they had to come and were able to join us and adapt so quickly. Thanks to the audience and to those of you who shared. Very, very grateful, and hope that we'll be in touch again in the near future. Okay.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.